we have nearly 800 observers here for a couple of days who come, travel around the country, see how the nation is doing, and then do what? Do they advise? Do you get to advise the government? Do you get to write anything about it? I guess, what do the people of Uzbekistan get from this?
Well, that's a good question, and one which I've been asking myself, because I am one of these 800, and they bring you here asking for nothing in return. So now you have people who are informed about what's going on here, like myself, that's my job, and you got people who got no idea about Uzbekistan. So I think that having 3 or 4 days around the country and seeing how the election works, the preparation, even say tomorrow for the aftermath, I think that can possibly swing the opinion of some of this, possibly the disinformed ones, so the kind of persuasion that this is a country that is going in the direction that the government wants them to believe. So it's kind of, a propaganda, soft propaganda tool, if you want.
So the Uzbek officials have told me actually just now that this is public diplomacy. What is wrong, they said, if we invite the intellectual community from around the world who care about us? We select them because they care, because we watch their work, because we know that they are interested in our country. Yes, we host them. We, give them this luxury of, having some time spent, but we're also giving them access. We're also letting them know about how we're doing nowadays, what we're doing, and where we're struggling. It's not just propaganda as far as they're concerned.
It's not entirely wrong, though. I mean, there is a bit of that as well, but it also, I think that it depends on the single observer. So, for instance, I made sure that I sit with every director of each of the police stations that I visited to have a chat after they did their own show. And my idea was to try to discuss the campaign more than the election. So obviously it was mediated because there were people observing there. They were doing some translation from Uzbek and into Uzbek. So in that sense, I wasn't entirely free to do what I wanted, but I made my observation about what I think is the concept and the application of the concept of the election, because I was given this very restrictive idea that voting is a mechanical act, that our elections are perfectly organized, that there is a computer, and in fact it's a deeply political act. And I was trying to discuss that with the people responsible for that, and it came out quite a few interesting discussions. So that was the use that I made of it. Obviously different people do different things.
So you've been to Uzbekistan before. This is not your first time, but this is your second time as an observer, right?
Yes.
Are there any differences between this time and the previous, which I think was in 2019? Do you think that the system has evolved?
I mean, you're right, that was in 2019, so that was the first parliamentary election of the Mirziyoyev era. I think that there are 2 considerations to make. The first one is that the country, at least Tashkent, well, I was in Tarakan as well, so I did a bit of touring as well this time, seems to be doing in somewhat better direction in terms of economics. There is more development. That's something which you can't deny. It's more functional. There seems to be more work. Obviously, I don't know how much wealth is spread. There is inequality for sure, but there is a kind of progress which I don't really see anywhere in Central Asia at this moment. And that's the background against which the election moves. But the election itself, and that is the point which I also made to the people in the police station today, is less dynamic than 2019. It's much less dynamic. And in 2019, there were people in the street discussing, you could feel that the people were excited about what was going on. There was a political understanding of what went on, even if the field allowed to run was a regime-only field as we have this time. So 2019 there was enthusiasm about that, and whereas this time I didn't see it.
And many Uzbeks actually notice that, and they acknowledge that, and when we ask them about why that is, they say they're disappointed. They say at least, in conversations with the Voice of America, they say that the system, and obviously including President Mirziyoyev, seemed more open for changes, more willing to liberalize the country than now. They see that the country gradually closed for the last 2 years, since the pandemic, actually.
The explanation I was given to them is see this as a snap election. It was no time to prepare, which obviously it's not something which I could believe. But I actually relate this lack of enthusiasm to the lack of proper candidate engagement. So I know that the candidates have gone to the region, I know that they've done their own thing, but there has not been a televised debate. There has not been the possibility of the people to see how their president or the wannabe president answer a different question, operates under pressure, and that to me reduces reduces on the one hand the relevance of the election, but also, and perhaps more importantly, it reduces the possibility to teach the people what elections are about, choice, choosing someone, selecting someone, and that to me is what diminished the relevance. Now there is one thing which I'm not one of those Westerners who thinks that the West does it best, because we have election in Spain, snap election on the 23rd of July. They only have one debate. One debate would have been enough even here, but not having surrogates who discuss the position, having the actual president and the actual candidate discussing.
Right, and we also forget as we analyze this that there is no debate culture here. So a lot of people here don't know the difference. So a few days ago, when the special representatives of these three candidates, other than President Mirziyoyev, they were debating, a lot of people were really, really excited that they were going to talk with each other, even though they're not like directly nominees, right, discussing each other. But also I heard others cynically saying that what's the point? These people aren't gonna get elected anyways. They're puppets, they're string puppets. And they will be fooling us by orchestrating this heated debate, but ultimately this debate is not about winning.
Even though I am a very well-known cynical, I will say enough about that I disagree with this. Because on the one hand, yes, it's true. This is a kind of, we know who's gonna win, we all have to wait for how much he won by. But I think that building the culture of debate is something that is important at this stage.
So look at this as an exercise?
I will do that. It's a step towards creating something. That's what I told to the people this morning. I would say that having a culture of debate in which you test, not the president, even the candidate, the people talk to are very interested about the woman, the female candidate, and you have to say, don't you want to know whether your president is able to answer a question, tough question, and show leadership? That would be something interesting. Obviously, we have to be realistic. We're not going to get a free and open competition.
If President Mirziyoyev decided to debate, that would have completely changed the picture.
Yes, I think it's just that matter. We have to be realistic in what at the benchmark that we request Uzbekistan and the other states in the region. You're not going to get a free and fair election, you're not going to get open competition, unfortunately. But the next big thing would be to have a situation like this in which it's safe for the regime, but allows some kind of debate. So at least you have some kind of political exercise going on. And the people get used to that. In the future, they will ask for more. So I think that it's a missed opportunity in that sense. The reality that we were never going to have the possibility of all the constitutional referendum and amendment and the abolition of term limits. This was not going to be an opportunity for someone else to get the job rather than Mirziyoyev. But I think that even that could have been used as a teachable moment, if you want, for the population. We say, we have a step up. This time we have the 4 candidates, maybe next time we have the candidates as well, and then in the future, who knows? But like that, you waste an opportunity to educate them on what politics really is about.
So ahead of the presidential elections in 2021, this group called Truth, Development and Unity tried to get registered. They failed to get registered. They tried again this year ahead of the presidential election. They failed again. And yet, There is now an opposition group in Uzbekistan. It is based in Tashkent. You can engage them. They are promoting their platform around the country. They are collecting signatures as we speak. But the government doesn't necessarily take credit for that. The government, Mirziyoyev leadership, is rejecting the registration of this group, but at the same time, they're leaving them alone to do what they want to do. That makes Tashkent, Uzbekistan, quite interesting in the eyes of many Uzbeks, because Uzbeks are used to their governments denouncing the people who come out and claim to be the opposition. They're used to seeing these people persecuted and prosecuted. And now many Uzbeks find it confusing that while the government isn't necessarily going after this group, they're also not registering. So, you study these kind of processes, and we've talked with you about how authoritarian the regime is, but also how it's been trying to modernize itself and maybe even turn hybrid, sometimes. How do you see this dynamic? You have an informal opposition, which is working quite hard to be recognized as a formal party, and the government is basically letting them be, but not registering them.
If you look more widely across Central Asia and beyond, you realize that there is not a single political party that
is opposition.
Nowhere. You look south, you look north, there is none. And even Russia now and Belarus. So it's really it's a region of monoparty system or regime systems. So there is no precedent. We don't have such precedent in Central Asia, at least not in the last 15, 20 years. So I think that they just follow the practice that they feel familiar with and they feel secure with. But the fact that they allow some kind of debate or some kind of activity as well, I suppose, it shows that they are not willing to close the curtain of a political activity. I think they learned the lesson from the past, where if you start to be more repressive, you end up being completely isolated, and they can't afford this.
In your conversations with the members of the establishment and others, who work for the government, did you hear anything about this?
No, I didn't. No.
So there was no discussion of the lack of opposition or of the existence of a non-formal?
No.
Because that is very interesting, because you almost never hear. Although the government, at times, the leadership says that Uzbekistan should eventually have an organic opposition, something that's not groomed abroad, something that doesn't get support from the outside, that whatever opposition emerges, it should come from within, naturally. So somewhere they need to start, right? What would be an exercise on this?
What we've seen, actually, and moving to the media for a second, because I want to use...
Sure, yeah,
So
yeah.
we've seen before the pandemic that the media was becoming freer and more open and less controlled. After the pandemic, that kind of situation has been, as you know very well, reined in. And now there are more and more censorship, suppression, and harassment of the media. I wouldn't want that to happen to this opposition as well. We've seen that some dynamics here are moving back, and having this group unrecognized but active is possibly better than having them recognized or just completely marginalized and outlawed. So I guess that we need to be less picky. Unfortunately, we need to do what we're given, and if there is opposition like that, possibly, But see, there is opposition, but there is no cultural protest.
So for the longest time, we have heard from the United States and also from the EU the supporting statements about civil society, about the need of the civil society, about their role, about the importance of developing a civil society. And when they mean civil society, they also include those critical voices that question the authorities, that push for justice and other things. And yet, for the first time, we're now hearing from this opposition group that they're not asking for any assistance from the West. They don't want any kind of support from them. They're basically saying that we want the laws of the country to work. So it's not like we're asking for permission from the government to exist as a party. We want to register formally so that we can run. Otherwise, we already exist. And we don't want the outsiders to speak for us or about us and complicate the picture. Do you find that interesting?
Well, I think that is a sign that the influence of the West is seen as pernicious in this part of the world. Now you have a lot of, there is the rhetoric about that what comes from the West is negative.
You actually look at it as a liability,
yes, a bit. You saw it in Kyrgyzstan, you saw it in Kazakhstan. So there is this also, they don't want to be accused of being for the paid and supported for the West, like a call of institutional revolution. So they want to be seen as properly Uzbek. The civil society, though, is necessary, and I think that having that debate televised in which the people watch it, is not just an important political ritual to educate the Uzbek, but it could also be a moment to instigate some civil society formation, as an inspiration of these people go on television, they talk about that. Why don't I, as a young girl or a young boy, do the same and start to get involved in politics? That's the culture which is missing, and that's the culture which this regime is not really building. And you can't just be about development, fantastic trains and new buildings, which have been showed quite a lot. It is very much about what kind of awareness of the rights you see in the population. I hear the new constitution is about the human being, well, it's not really operationalized in that sense. And that's how I see it as a missed opportunity, the 2023 election.
I heard something really interesting today. In 2019, when I asked the leaders of the four formal parties about who they look up to, who are they learning from, this political technology, as they say, the way they foster their political parties, promote and increase the membership, where do you learn how to develop politically? That was my question. Who are you looking at? One party mentioned Germany, another party looked at Turkey as a model, another party mentioned Russia. I asked the same question today, and they said, we don't know. They basically said that we don't know. Russia doesn't appeal to us anymore. Turkey is way too complicated, and Germany is too liberal, and we don't really have. So now more than ever, they believe, these political operatives, that we need. They say we need to kind of forge our own ways. Like we need to have some kind of a concoction that we can, learn from.
It is a difficult time. The geopolitics of Eurasia are so complex, and even the politics in Europe, both the Union and the single market tenement, are very complex to explain. So I'm not wondering that they don't know who to look to. And it's also this idea of domestic versus foreigner, which I think is something which, and this election happens against the backdrop of a war, not very far from here, culturally and also geographically. How nice would it have been if we heard about that situation during the debate? We don't really know. I've been to a conference in foreign policy, it wasn't really mentioned. They select what they wanted to talk about.
What would you advise to the governments in the EU and in the United States who still want to assist in terms of the rule of law, independent judiciary, political development, political reforms? What would be the best way to approach knowing all of this, knowing this complexity,
First of all, they should send people who know the country rather than just having bureaucrats in Brussels. I don't know about the US, but I talk about I'm European, so they should ask people who know about how to engage. And also, they should be realistic about what they can achieve in Central Asia. They have been too lofty, too demanding. These regimes are intractable. They're not close to Europe. There is no membership perspective for them. They have to be sort of gently brought in. The office of conditionality must be firm, strict, but you have to be realistic about this, what you ask. So I know what the OSCE is going to say tomorrow, and I would focus next time on the campaign rather than on the election. The election here works fairly well. The mechanics, as you know, were perfect. Very well meant, perfectly organized. I'm pretty sure they count in the votes. Not before, but now they certainly are. So, as a mechanical act, works. Is the lack of content in the campaign that I would focus on if I were the EU. and say, well, ideally you have someone who doesn't agree, but even those who seem to be in agreement but they call to run, they should behave as if there's a true competition. If only to instill some kind of initial understanding of what politics really is in the people. It's a small step. It will take 1-2 generations, but if we don't start for this small thing, we're gonna have 30 more years of authoritarianism here in the other part of the region.
Okay, well, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.